Let me go back a little bit. Singapore and Malaysia, we signed the HSR bilateral agreement, we call it HSR-BA, in 2016, and that's after 3 years of negotiations to implement the HSR project. And subsequently, both parties signed 2 supplementary agreements relating to the suspension of the construction of the HSR project. Both suspensions were at Malaysia's request. So the first supplementary agreement was signed in 2018 to suspend the construction of the HSR project. The second in 2020 extended the suspension period to 31st December 2020, with the explicit understanding that it would be the final extension. By then, it would have been extended 2.5 years. I will refer to the HSR bilateral agreement, subsequently amended by the supplementary agreements generically as HSR agreements, as a short form. So the HSR agreements are legally binding international agreements. Parties come to the table as equal, discuss the various terms such as how to structure and implement the cross-border HSR project, and the rights and obligations placed on both parties. As members know, this process involves understanding each other's concerns, addressing them, striking compromises, and finding mutually acceptable common ground. Singapore was fully committed to carry out our obligations under the HSR-BA, but Malaysia felt that circumstances had changed, including due to COVID-19, and proposed several changes to the HSR project. Be clear about this, which is Singapore was not obligated to agree to any of such changes because we signed an agreement in 2016 already, but notwithstanding, we considered them in good faith. But we were unable to agree to one particularly significant change proposed by Malaysia. This involved the removal of the Assets Company, short form we call it Assets Co, which is the system supplier and network operator of the HSR service between Singapore and Kuala Lumpur. Let me explain why. As a HSR is a cross-border service, it must be a single train system operating between Singapore and KL and Malaysia. Because neither country has the expertise and experience in operating the HSR, we agreed under the HSR-BA to appoint a best-in-class industry player through an open and transparent international tender to assume the role of the Assets Co. So once appointed, the Assets Co would supply the train system, operate the network, ensure that appropriate priority is given to cross-border HSR service vis-a-vis Malaysia's domestic service, and Assets Co will be accountable to both countries, Singapore and Malaysia. To Singapore, Assets Co is the centerpiece of the HSR project. It is necessary to ensure that the interests of both countries are protected. This will minimize the possibility of future disagreements and disputes over the long duration of the project, lasting decades. Singapore therefore informed Malaysia that the removal of the Assets Co constituted a fundamental departure from the HSR-BA and could not be accepted. Malaysia has since decided to allow the HSR-BA to be terminated. In these circumstances, it has to compensate Singapore in accordance with the HSR agreements. Now that the HSR-BA has been terminated, Singapore is willing to discuss any new proposal on the KL-Singapore HSR from Malaysia in good faith, but starting from a clean slate.